Millions of people around the world claim to have seen ghosts, felt presences, or experienced unexplained phenomena. But are ghosts actually real, or is there a scientific explanation for these experiences? Today we're looking at what science actually says about ghosts, and the answer is more nuanced than you might expect. Before we dive in, let's be clear about what we're exploring. We're not trying to prove or disprove anyone's personal experiences. Instead, we're examining the evidence, the theories, and the scientific frameworks that might explain what people are experiencing when they encounter what they believe are ghosts. Let's start with the most fundamental question. What would a ghost even be from a scientific perspective? Most ghost stories describe them as the consciousness or energy of a deceased person that somehow persists after death. For this to be possible, consciousness would need to exist independently of the physical brain, and some form of energy or information would need to continue after the body stops functioning. Interestingly, some quantum physics theories we discussed in previous videos do suggest that consciousness might not be entirely dependent on the brain. If consciousness operates according to quantum principles, and if quantum information cannot be destroyed, then theoretically, some form of consciousness or information pattern could persist after death. This doesn't prove ghosts exist, but it provides a theoretical framework where they could be possible. Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose have proposed that consciousness arises from quantum processes in brain microtubules. If they're correct, then consciousness isn't just electrical and chemical signals. It's quantum information. When someone dies, this quantum information wouldn't necessarily disappear. It might dissipate into the environment or continue in some form we don't fully understand yet. Could this quantum information manifest as what people perceive as ghosts? It's speculative, but some researchers have suggested that under certain conditions, residual quantum information patterns might interact with living observers in ways that create ghost experiences. Now let's look at what neuroscience says about ghost sightings. Studies have shown that certain conditions can cause people to perceive presences that aren't there. Infrasound, which is sound below the range of human hearing, can cause feelings of unease, anxiety, and even visual hallucinations. Many supposedly haunted locations have high levels of infrasound from sources like wind, machinery, or building structure vibrations. Research by Vic Tandy, a British scientist, showed that a 19 Hz infrasound frequency can cause the human eyeball to vibrate, creating visual distortions that might appear as shadowy figures. This same frequency has been detected in many locations reported to be haunted. Electromagnetic fields are another factor. Studies have found that exposure to specific electromagnetic field patterns can trigger experiences that people describe as ghostly. Sensing a presence, feeling watched, seeing shadows, or experiencing unexplained emotions. Dr. Michael Persinger conducted experiments where he could reliably create these experiences by exposing people's brains to certain electromagnetic patterns. Here's what's interesting. This doesn't necessarily mean ghosts aren't real. It could mean that whatever ghosts are, they interact with us through electromagnetic or infrasound mechanisms. If consciousness after death exists as some form of energy or information pattern, it might naturally produce electromagnetic effects that living brains can detect. Sleep paralysis explains many ghost encounters. During sleep paralysis, you're conscious but can't move, and it's often accompanied by hallucinations of shadowy figures, feelings of pressure on the chest, and a sense of malevolent presence. These experiences feel absolutely real to the person experiencing them, and many historical accounts of demons, ghosts, and supernatural entities might actually be descriptions of sleep paralysis. However, this explanation doesn't account for all ghost experiences. Many people report encounters while fully awake, sometimes with multiple witnesses seeing the same thing, or experiencing phenomena that leave physical evidence like moved objects or recorded sounds. Let's talk about the evidence that's harder to explain. There are documented cases of ghost sightings with multiple independent witnesses, photographs and videos showing anomalies that haven't been conclusively debunked. electronic voice phenomena recorded in controlled conditions, and physical effects like temperature drops or object movements witnessed by credible observers. The Society for Psychical Research, founded in 1882 by scientists from Cambridge University, has been investigating paranormal claims for over 140 years. While they've debunked many supposed hauntings, they've also documented cases that remain unexplained even after rigorous investigation. One of the most studied locations is the Winchester Mystery House in California. Multiple research teams with scientific equipment have recorded temperature anomalies, electromagnetic field fluctuations, and audio recordings that some consider evidence of paranormal activity. Skeptics suggest these might be due to the building's unusual architecture and environmental factors, but the debate continues. Gettysburg Battlefield is another location where researchers have documented unusual phenomena. Given the intense trauma and death that occurred there, some theorists suggest that if consciousness can leave an imprint on physical locations, places of extreme emotional or traumatic events would be most likely to show these effects. This brings us to an interesting theory called stone tape theory. This hypothesis, which draws from physics and psychology, suggests that materials like stone or wood might be able to record and play back emotional or traumatic events under certain conditions, similar to how magnetic tape records sound. While not proven, it's based on the concept that everything is energy vibrating at different frequencies, and traumatic events might create energetic imprints that sensitive individuals can perceive. From an energy perspective, the first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. If consciousness is a form of energy, it wouldn't disappear at death. It would transform into something else. Could ghosts be a transformed state of human consciousness energy? It's speculative, but scientifically it's not impossible. Some physicists have explored whether ghosts could exist in parallel dimensions or other dimensional states. Modern physics, particularly string theory, suggests there may be up to 11 dimensions of reality, though we can only directly perceive 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. If additional dimensions exist, consciousness after death might transition into one of these dimensional states. What we perceive as ghosts could be moments when these dimensions overlap or intersect with our own, allowing brief glimpses or interactions between different dimensional planes. Think of it like this. Imagine a 2-dimensional being living on a flat piece of paper. If a 3-dimensional object passes through their plane, they would only see a cross-section, a mysterious shape appearing and disappearing that they couldn't fully comprehend. Similarly, if beings or consciousness exist in higher dimensions, we might only perceive fragments or shadows of their presence when they interact with our 3-dimensional reality. This dimensional theory could explain several puzzling aspects of ghost phenomena. Why do ghosts often appear translucent or partially visible? Perhaps we're only seeing the part of them that intersects with our dimensional plane. Why do they seem to pass through walls? Because in higher dimensions, what we perceive as solid barriers might not exist as obstacles. Why do some locations seem more haunted than others? Certain places might be dimensional thin spots where the barriers between realities are weaker, making interactions more likely. Locations with unusual electromagnetic properties, geological features, or sites of intense emotional events might create conditions where dimensional boundaries become permeable. Some researchers studying paranormal phenomena have noted that ghost sightings often coincide with unusual electromagnetic readings or quantum field fluctuations. If ghosts exist in adjacent dimensions, they might create detectable disturbances in electromagnetic or quantum fields when attempting to interact with our dimension. This theory also aligns with reports from people who claim to see ghosts. They often describe the experience as if the ghost is not quite here or existing in a slightly different space, which is exactly what we'd expect if we were perceiving something existing primarily in another dimension. Cultural universality is another interesting aspect. Ghost beliefs exist in virtually every human culture throughout history, from ancient civilizations to modern societies. This universal phenomenon could mean one of two things. Either there's a real phenomenon that all cultures are experiencing, or there's something about human psychology and neurology that makes us prone to interpreting certain experiences as encounters with the dead. Children often report seeing deceased relatives or presences that adults can't see. Skeptics suggest this is imagination, or the way children process grief. But some researchers point out that children under 5, before heavy cultural conditioning, report these experiences with remarkable consistency across different cultures. Are they more sensitive to phenomena adults have learned to filter out? Or are they experiencing something in their developing brains that adults don't? Let's examine some specific types of reported ghost phenomena and what might explain them. Apparitions, full-bodied visible ghosts, are the rarest type of sighting. When they do occur with multiple witnesses, it becomes harder to explain as hallucination. Some researchers suggest these might be holographic projections of consciousness or electromagnetic phenomena that our brains interpret as visual images. Shadow figures are commonly reported dark shapes or silhouettes, usually seen peripherally. These could be explained by pareidolia, where our brains interpret random patterns as familiar shapes, especially in low light. However, some shadow figure encounters include physical effects like temperature drops or electronic malfunctions that are harder to explain. Poltergeist phenomena involve objects moving, sounds, or physical disturbances. Most investigated cases have been explained by natural causes, pranks, or unconscious psychokinesis by living people, usually adolescents going through stress or hormonal changes. But a small percentage of well-documented cases remain unexplained. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, involves recording audio that sounds like voices or words in environments where no one is speaking. Skeptics point to radio interference, audio artifacts, and pareidolia in hearing random sounds as words. Researchers who study EVP argue that some recordings show responses to questions that are too specific to be coincidence or pattern matching. Residual hauntings are described as repetitive phenomena, like hearing footsteps at the same time each night, or seeing the same apparition repeat the same actions. These are thought to be recordings rather than intelligent spirits, possibly explained by the stone tape theory we mentioned earlier. Intelligent hauntings supposedly involve interactive entities that respond to living people. If these are real, they would be the strongest evidence for consciousness surviving death. However, these are also the hardest to study scientifically because they're unpredictable and difficult to reproduce under controlled conditions. Several universities have conducted serious scientific studies on haunted locations. The results are mixed. Some studies find that electromagnetic fields, infrasound, and suggestion can explain most experiences. Other studies document anomalies that researchers can't fully explain with current scientific knowledge. Dr. Richard Wiseman, a skeptical psychologist, conducted experiments in reportedly haunted locations. While he found that environmental factors like lighting, temperature, and building layout influenced people's experiences, he admitted that some reported phenomena were harder to explain and deserved further investigation. The challenge with studying ghosts scientifically is that they don't appear to follow consistent, testable laws. Science requires phenomena to be observable, measurable, and reproducible. Ghost experiences are typically spontaneous, unpredictable, and subjective, making them extremely difficult to study using traditional scientific methods. However, absence of proof isn't proof of absence. Just because we can't currently detect or measure something with our instruments doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We only discovered radio waves, X-rays, and countless other phenomena after developing the right technology to detect them. Some researchers suggest that if ghosts exist, they might operate at frequencies or in dimensions that our current technology can't detect. We're constantly discovering new aspects of reality, from quantum entanglement to dark matter. It's possible that consciousness after death exists in a form we simply don't have the tools to measure yet. Personal experience is another important factor. Millions of people claim to have had genuine encounters with deceased loved ones that provided specific information they couldn't have known. While anecdotal evidence isn't scientific proof, the sheer volume of consistent reports across cultures and throughout history is worth considering. Deathbed visions are particularly intriguing. Healthcare workers report that dying patients often describe seeing deceased relatives in the room, sometimes days before death. These experiences are remarkably consistent across cultures. Skeptics attribute them to brain chemistry changes during the dying process. Others wonder if people near death become more sensitive to consciousness existing in different states. So where does this leave us? Here's what we can say based on current scientific understanding. Many ghost experiences can be explained by psychology, neurology, environmental factors, and natural phenomena. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines that can create compelling experiences even when nothing supernatural is occurring. However, a subset of well-documented cases remains unexplained by conventional science. These cases involve multiple witnesses, physical evidence, or information that couldn't be known through normal means. Current physics theories, particularly in quantum mechanics, don't rule out the possibility of consciousness existing independently of the physical body. If consciousness is quantum information, and quantum information can't be destroyed, then some form of persistence after death is theoretically possible. Whether we call persistent consciousness ghosts is perhaps a matter of definition. If consciousness continues after death in any form, and if it can occasionally interact with the physical world or with living consciousness, then in some sense, ghosts would be real. The honest scientific position is, we don't know for certain. We have explanations for many ghost experiences, but not all of them. We have theories about how consciousness after death might be possible, but no definitive proof. The phenomenon deserves serious scientific study, rather than automatic dismissal or uncritical acceptance. What's your take on this? Have you had an experience you couldn't explain? Do you think ghosts are consciousness after death, electromagnetic phenomena we don't fully understand, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this exploration into the science and mystery of ghosts got you thinking about consciousness and what might exist beyond our current understanding, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're investigating the boundaries where science meets the unexplained. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into phenomena that challenge what we think we know about reality. The universe is stranger than we imagine, and the truth about ghosts might be more complex than either believers or skeptics realize.